There we
Hey,
go.
everybody. What's up?
Yeah.
That was that was a show. You
And
guys like that show? It was a great show.
luckily, also while our video was playing, I noticed that the live button had not been clicked yet. So if the intro just kind of started halfway through, that's
Oh,
news.
did we not click it?
Yeah. So I made sure I saw it. I was like, oh no, that
Oh,
wasn't the
good
word I
call.
used. I used a different word. But
Hot diggity darn.
gosh darn it.
I'm just setting some stuff up here, guys. Sorry about that. Like that was an odd I don't understand what happened. So that was weird.
Maybe it's because we were talking about that video.
Well, the video, speaking of the
It must
video,
be real. It must be
guys,
real
for your
because
consideration, I don't know if you guys saw this, but a woman freaked out on a plane this week. Did they say where this was? What city this was in?
Miami, I think.
Miami. So we're gonna play the
Miami.
video for you today. Obviously, um, questionable language, but it's not horrible. It's bleeped, I think. So we're gonna play this for you. Let us know what you think.
Or they cannot believe it. I don't give two but I am telling you right now, that back there is not real.
All right. So there you have it. That mother is not real. Who's she talking about? Do you guys think? Now, my co-host, he doesn't buy it. He thinks she was obliterated on something on a substance of some form and or fashion.
Being a person who's a frequent partaker of alcoholic beverages, it sounds like her voice is she's been drinking. And I found an article, I don't know, there's every article I found is not, there aren't any articles from, and I know I'm going to say some names that people are going to laugh at, but I haven't found anything from CNN, ha ha ha, or Fox, ha ha ha, or MSNBC, or any of the big name people, which I don't
Right.
necessarily take that as a term like to automatically believe them. But I also like, if I don't find anything by them and everything else I find is from like little off things like this is from Yahoo News, but it's from a news organization called Your Tango. I don't know. Like none of them sounded right. Like the Sun, which is kind of a tabloid newspaper and things like that. I mean,
Right.
but they said somewhere in the article it says that she had been drinking. It was confirmed that she'd been drinking before she got on the plane, and that she'd been already pretty drunk on the plane. But
Okay.
other people say that she was yelling at a flight attendant, that the flight attendant wasn't real.
Oh.
But then somebody else said no on my TikTok video, which again is another point for, because of course TikTok is super accurate. They said that she was yelling at a guy in a green hoodie who sat there silent and didn't say anything. Which, sometimes if you get yelled at in the plane, you don't know why somebody's freaking out. Of course, what are you going to do? You're just going to be like, I'm not going to make things worse. I'm just going to sit here. But other people are saying that that's because he was a reptilian or something like that. And I'm kind of like, I don't know. There's no real evidence for any of this stuff. And most of the commentary on it is from places like TikTok, which again is not, foremost for news accuracy.
So I've heard a couple of different theories involving this. I've heard it was a I'm gonna have to fix my camera. Fix that off camera. I heard she saw an AI. That's what I've heard. I've been hearing it was the AI. And with the AI thing that's been going on, like it's just been something that's been in the news as of late. So that could be it. It could be an AI.
I don't know. I tend to think that maybe she had been drinking and maybe the guy said something to her and she was seeing a real person, but maybe something they said, it got scrambled in her brain or something. Or maybe somebody was being creepy and was playing a trick on her that got out of hand. And they're like, oh, this person's drunk. I'm going to say some stuff and be weird. I don't know. Or maybe it was a person that was like dressed up and wasn't real. Maybe it was a person wearing fake skin and it's the Uncanny Valley and all that other good stuff. I don't know. I'm super skeptical. of the video, and I'd avoided it until you told me that I should go ahead and go and watch it. And now that I've seen it, I'm kind of like, I feel like this is why I was avoiding it, because I don't know, it's not compelling to me. But again, I can't 100% say there's nothing to it because I wasn't there. I don't know the details. There's not enough details. The news sources I'm finding are not that great. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think they need to find this woman and get some answers.
Mm.
Maybe she's the AI. Yes, artificial intelligence. Sorry, yes, artificial intelligence. Maybe she's the AI.
Could be.
What do you think about that?
Drunk
folks?
AI.
Drunk AI.
If they scanned me for an AI program, then that's probably what they'd get. Drunk AI.
I doubt it. Anyways, tonight we are talking about the amazing galactic. No, not galactic. I'm sorry. We're talking about Leylines today. What do you guys think about that? How do you guys feel about Leylines? Like, what are your guys' opinion on Leylines? Do you think they're real? Do you think they're fraudulent? Because a lot of archaeologists say that they don't exist, but other people say they do. What are your guys' thoughts? Let us know in the comments. What are your thoughts there, Spider?
Well, we have done a show on this before, and we made a lot of good points, and I'm going to reiterate some of those points too. I think there is something to it. I don't know if it's quite exactly what people say it is, but there is something to. And I bring this up a lot of times when we talk about these sorts of things. And it's always a good time to mention one of my favorite books, which is American Gods, where they talk about like roadside attractions and things that are just out in the middle of nowhere in real weird places. And a lot of times when they interview people, they're like, "Oh yeah, something told me I had to put something here." And this was the first idea that came to mind. And they're goofy things like that car henge thing and stuff, and like world's largest ball of twine and weird stuff like that. They just like,
True.
this is the place it has to be. And that's something that you hear in other places too. You hear sometimes about ancient ruins and things like, why did they build this? And in the few cases where we kind of have an idea of why they were built that, it's because, oh yeah, there's an energy here. They wanted to harness the energy here.
Yep.
Like people build things that matter in places that matter, but they don't look like they matter because there's nothing else around. There's no villages,
Right.
no towns, there's no civilization. Whereas people build things that are that don't really matter, but they pretend they matter in places like New York City, where you got like big skyscrapers to people's egos and things like that. You've got things like all over the place that are like monuments to just CEOs and things like that. You got Trump Tower, you've got all kinds of stuff like that. You don't find people building things like that out in these wild places. And it's just interesting because there has to be something to it. People don't just on a large scale basis go and just build stuff out there for nothing and then continue to maintain it a lot of times at their own cost.
True. So for me, it's very interesting. It would be, I think it'd be tough to believe it if there weren't so many places that were built on top of them. And to me, that is what kind of seals the deal for me in regards to what are known as ley lines. And I think that what we have to do is we got to take into account a lot of these so-called conspiracies, I guess would be the key term to use. Because people either think ley lines are like these magical portals and you can do magic on them, or they just think they're a common occurrence type thing. And so, yeah, that's true as to where Tesla did supposedly use ley lines to pull Earth's energy out from the ground. And supposedly that's how he built his Wardenclyffe Tower, or for his Wardenclyffe Towers to do that. Sometimes people will come up with some theories based on that, but I haven't seen a lot of that either. Baalbek is a whole nother avenue. We've talked about that a couple times on the show. It hasn't been too much, but we've discussed it. But ley lines, or in China they're known as dragon lines, are basically Earth's energy grid. So they're a series of lines that run around the Earth, and they intersect at different points. And those points that we'll get into are secondary nexuses, and we'll discuss that a little bit later on in today's episode of this Uncanny Earth, brought to you by us. There you go. So some of the bigger historical landmarks that you guys might know of are the Great Pyramids of Giza, the Stonehenge, and even the Kaaba in Mecca, the big giant block that
Mhm.
sits there. So that's just one of the few places there. And then it is through these intersecting lines that there's high concentrations of electricity or energy. And they are able to take, people are able to take energy and information and run it along these lines to different places. And other folks are able to pick them up or use this energy in order to connect magic rituals, build things, get secret knowledge. Who knows if that's how Nikola Tesla obtained it via the universal consciousness that he said he could tap into, that the number nine was so very famous for allowing him to. It is thought that these lines intersect and meet. They align perfectly with astrological constellations. And the existence of said ley lines was first proposed in 1921 by archaeologist Alfred Watkins in his book, The Old Straight Track. Now, on June 30th, 1921, Watkins visited Blackwardine in Herefordshire. There's a lot of these places in the UK, like Shires, Herefordshire, and all that. So, and he noted that near some hills in Bradwardine, he noticed many footprints seemed to connect one hilltop to another in a straight line. Now, he was studying a map when he noticed places in alignment, and the whole thing came to me in a flash, as was quoted that he said to his son. Let's see what we got here. Oh, yeah. All right, cool. Long lines like dot and black, according to John Keel. That's interesting. So for those of you who don't know who John Keel, Mothman Prophecies, the book. He wrote another book too, but I forget the name of it off the top of my head. But yes, so these ley lines act as basically energy transfer sites. And so Watkins was able to notice that these lines or these footsteps ran to these different hilltops to connect one to the other. So he came up with the theory that maybe the Earth's energy is the same basic concept. Now, the Earth does produce energy. Maybe not so much as in ley lines like a lot of people think, but we have geothermal power, we have solar, or we have wind power, we have hydrothermal power. I almost said solar, and I'm like, that sun's not in the Earth unless it's the hollow Earth. Then there's a sun on the inside of the Earth.
There's something else too that was really interesting that may show other kinds of power that may again legitimize the ley line theory. I don't know for sure if anybody has thought to connect this yet, but it came to me just a minute ago while we were talking things through. Recently, they found that there's a gravity difference in the Indian Ocean. Like there's a gravity is weaker there or stronger there or something. It's either super weak or super strong there compared to other parts of the planet. The whole gravitational energy pull is different there.
Right.
And they found that underneath the Indian Ocean and underneath the crust of the planet, there's another ocean that used to be outside. It used to be above the surface, and it got pulled into the planet and buried like a giant void of water inside the Earth. And because it's in there, it's causing gravitational instability in that region. And they never knew why until they found that that ocean was there. Now, that's an interesting point because if you have something like that that can cause legitimate scientific problems with energy fields, which is basically what gravity is, it's an energy field, then you can affect other things too. It's not too far out to think that you could affect all kinds of other things on the planet through a connected, maybe grid or something. You know, there could be all kinds of these little pockets down there. And because of the way the Earth moves and because of the way everything's tectonically moving around, then they've all arranged themselves in a particular geometric pattern.
Which is quite possible considering that in other parts of the globe, such as the Bermuda Triangle, the magnetic readings have caused planes to disappear, ships to disappear, things to go missing. And if we take that concept and go a little bit further, then the ley line must run into there, or it's just an energy vortex, which is possible. And a lot of these ley lines intersect energy vortexes like Cydonia in Arizona, which we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, he was met with skepticism, of course, because anytime you try to propose something that isn't scientifically acceptable, you're always going to be met with harsh criticism because it doesn't fit in the scientific way of thinking. And so he was, when he published his ideas in 2 books. We talked about one previous and prior being The Old Straight Track, the other being Early British Trackways. So he had 2 books. I will probably try to read one of those if I can find one, depending on if people kept it published. If not, it'll be probably quite expensive, because what happened was a lot of the people that when this book came out, the archaeological magazines or books of the time, or the people that were putting the books out, weren't necessarily happy with what he was saying. So they decided they weren't going to advertise it and or push his book. And now we're talking some time. We're talking a little bit of time here. And so it's very interesting to note, 1921, 1920s, it's a weird time in America in the 1920s. We have World War One. Well, that was before 1920, but we're getting over World War One. We're getting over the whole concept of Americana. We're getting over the whole concept of the Victorian spiritualist age, where there were seances and there was all sorts of there's a word for it, and I'm drawing a blank. Things like theosophy and other such ideas and concepts that were kind of put to bed once science sort of took center stage in our society around that time. And these ideas were kind of put to bed as being nonsense and or malarkey after a lot of people found that the seances were fake. They had people going in. The 2 girls, we talked about this on a previous episode too, and I'm drawing a blank. The 2 girls that went, they went around the United States and even into Europe, proclaiming they could talk to spirits and stuff, and they found out that it was all fake, and they were just able to they had like little Morse code style taps with their feet and things like that.
Yeah, the table
to
tapping.
recognize, yes, table tapping and things
Table
like
tapping.
that. So that gave pretty much a bad meaning to spiritualism as a whole, and so all of that sort of got pushed to the side, and you had more of an enlightened theory and concept. The Fox sisters, there it is. Thank you very much, Deadpool. Put that up there for them, please, sir, if you would. Thank you very much. I appreciate you as always. And so things like ley lines were necessary, were just basically looked upon as, heretical in the archaeological world. The archaeological world of the time, and even in this time, in the time we're in now, is so strictly by the book. Nothing fantastic happened before this civilization came. They didn't have the technology before this civilization came. And we're finding out, as we talked about last week when we brought up the Baghdad battery, we're seeing that maybe, just maybe, these civilizations actually did have these resources. Now, despite these negative reviews and receptions, some experts made observations very similar to Watkins, and megalithic researcher himself, Alexander Thom, he offers a detailed analysis of megalithic alignments. He proposes a standardization of measure by those who built megaliths, but he avoids the term ley line. Then the discovery of Europeans of the Nazca lines, which are man-made lines, in the desert pavement in southern Peru, prompted study of their astronomical alignments. That was right. Now, I don't know if you guys heard about this. Greenpeace, I guess, went out and messed up some of those Nazca lines because Greenpeace are trash. They're always doing something stupid. So they messed up some of that. So hopefully that got fixed at some form or fashion. I don't know. I hope.
It was one of those things that was like big sensationalist news for like an hour, and then they were like, oh, well, more important things. Let's talk about this election thing or this whatever, and they just moved on. So unfortunately, unfortunately,
there's fight not in this much country or whatever.
Yeah, there's not much follow up to it, but yeah, I remember when that happened.
And there never will be because they don't really care about ancient sites like that. Next up, we have ley lines. Now, they're thought to be the product of ancient surveying. Property markings are commonly traveled pathways. a little bit more down to earth explanation for some of these things. Now, the alignments, those they have different theories in different circles. We have an archaeological, we have a cultural, we have the new age, and then we have obviously the skeptical. So let's go ahead and jump into this here with the archaeological. Yes, indeed. That's exactly what that is. So, a new area of archaeological study titled Archaeogeodesy examines geodesy as practiced in prehistoric time as evidenced by archaeological remains. Our major aspect of modern geodesy is, of course, surveying. And as interpreted by geodesy, the so called ley lines could be the product of ancient surveying, property markings, or as I stated previous, commonly traveled pathways. Numerous societies, both ancient and modern, employ straight lines between points of use, and archaeologists have documented these traditions. Now, modern surveying also results in placements of constructs in lines on the landscape, and it is reasonable to actually expect human constructs and activity areas to reflect use of lines. Given we drive on highways every day, this should make relatively decent sense. Now, culturally, it runs a little, pretty much the same. But many cultures actually use straight lines across the landscape. Who'd have thought that? Who'd have thought that? If you can do that, right?
Mm.
But in South America, such lines are often directed towards mountain peaks. The Nazca lines that we talked about in Peru are a famous example of lengthy lines that were created by an ancient civilization. Now, straight lines connect ancient pyramids in Mexico. Today, modern roads built on the ancient roads deviate around the massive pyramids. The Chaco culture of northeastern New Mexico cut stairs into sandstone cliffs to facilitate keeping roads straight because the closest point, the closest thing between 2 points is a straight line. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Now, the New Age one, this is the one that's going to probably fit more in line with what we're discussing tonight. Some writers widely regard this as a belief, but a lot of people call this pseudoscientific. And they believe that ley lines and their intersection report points, resonate a special psychic or magical energy. Now, these theories often include elements such as geomancy, which I think you've talked about before, dowsing, or UFOs. And some similar people believe these points on lines have electrical or magnetic forces associated with them, just as you had talked about with the Indian Ocean and just as I had talked about with the Bermuda Triangle. Very interesting to note. Also, some of the places that we will discuss, and I think you guys will get a better kind of picture of this when I show you some of the sites that the ley lines are said to be running underneath. And of course, we have the skeptical viewpoint of this. Skeptics, they're always eager to throw their thoughts in this thing. Skeptics of ley lines just classified as pseudoscience. They don't believe it. They tend to doubt the ley lines are planned or made by ancient cultures and argue that apparent ley lines can be readily explained without resorting to extraordinary or pseudoscientific claims. So, I mean, that's a skeptic. They're not gonna believe anything about anything that is supernatural. That's not in their DNA, I guess, as it were. And I think a good place to meet is in between archaeological and maybe New Age, maybe studying the sites, maybe studying the migration patterns of people to this site. Such places as the Pyramid of Giza that still stands. It's the only wonder of the 7 that still exists. All the other ones have been torn down, destroyed. The Colossus of Rhodes was destroyed.
Hanging
Palace of
Gardens,
Zeus,
Babylon.
Hanging Gardens of Babylon, Palace of Zeus. All of those were destroyed. But the Pyramid of Giza is one of the one true ancient wonders of the world, and it still stands today. So we're looking at ley lines here, and you're thinking to yourself, well, how could you measure something like this? And Spider makes up a good point. I think your gravitational measurements, I think your magnetic measurements, I think a lot of times that has a lot to do with it. But I also think you could also go by how people feel at these the locations.
Mm-hmm.
When we're gonna look at the Temple Mound, for instance. Now, if you guys don't know about the Temple Mound, it was the site of the first temple built by King Solomon of biblical fame, and it has a very important idea to both Muslims and Christians and Jews. So it's very religiously important. And a lot of these places have strong ties to religious beliefs that a lot of people don't really take into consideration. And religion is a very serious thing. You know, we say that we don't really talk about religion much on the show. I know Spider brings up some points in his Saturday Spiritualist when he discusses different belief systems. And I'll be coming out soon with I have an idea for the show. I just gotta, I don't know if I'm going to call it this yet, but I'm leaning on the Thursday Theologian. See what's happening with that. It's not a bad title, I think.
Okay.
But religion is a very powerful thing to people. Anything that involves death, you have a lot of death belief systems built, and utilized around death. And a lot of these places, I am nobody's savior, my friend, but thank you very much. A lot of these places are religious. A lot of these places are religious or very politically held locations, as we'll get into very shortly here. The Monday
Deadpool has a high
Messiah.
opinion of you.
Yeah, he does. Thank you,
Deadpool
sir.
has
I
a really high
appreciate it.
opinion of you.
Thank you. I am not that either. Do not do that to me. I'll be struck by lightning on the first show. That would not be good.
There's a little point too that I thought of, that while you were talking about the travel of people back and forth on these lines, that does make a lot of sense, because we've talked about in a lot of our episodes about spirits and ghosts, about how places can kind of collect thoughts and feelings and things from things that happened there.
Yep.
And you got to think how many people travel a specific route back and forth.
Yeah.
Over maybe hundreds of even thousands of years. Some of the oldest of these ley lines are trackways that they're trade routes and things like that. People have followed them back and forth. And the number of people who've had success and tragedy and just death, or new life was born along the way, or whatever, in these specific ways, going this direction, going that direction, on a specific path, all that's got to build up somewhere too. So that could all theoretically collect some of that psychic energy and infuse the pathway and make it essentially what a ley line is.
And that's the thing too that I don't think a lot of people can fully grasp, is the energy that people bring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not just the energy from the earth, but human beings are balls of energy in and of ourselves. So a lot of times people do not really understand how that works. They just go into it thinking, oh, it's just the earth's energy. But when you add our energy to all of that, then you're also adding energy from the sun. You're adding your solar energies that come down from obviously the sun, which I just said. You're adding to these places. And let me tell you something. The energy of a human being is not to be trifled with. And people say, well, they don't have that. There is power in prayer. I don't care what really anybody says. I've seen it. You get a group of people together and they can will something into existence. I have willed things into existence myself. I can't explain it to you, but there's been times when I have wanted something so badly that it's all I've thought of, and it happens. That's the interesting aspect for me. And like you said, you got people going through there. So maybe even by having people there, you're building that foundation. Another thing to note too is that when you're building these places, what was the ability of these places before? What was the connection before all this happened? So I just think that's something we need to take into account as we're going forward into what we are doing and what we are talking about tonight. Now, what I want to get into next, and this is going to be this is the fun half. We're going to get into some places, the secondary nexuses themselves. I'm going to bring up some images for you guys. You guys can get a better understanding of these locations when I show them to you. So let's start off. The secondary nexuses are actually places where the ley lines converge, and they're considered highly sacred or special places to many people around the earth. Let's bring out our first one here. We're gonna do one of these here because I gotta do a little bit of goofing. A little bit of goofing. Oh no, I was not. I did the wrong goofing.
I don't want to spoil anything. I just want to ask real quick. Are you going to bring up DC?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Then,
Yeah.
then I won't. I was thinking I want to kind of mention it because.
Yes, 100%.
But I'm going to wait because if you're already going to talk about it, then I
Yes.
can weigh in then.
Yes, 100%. And I want you to weigh in. Yeah, this wouldn't be an episode if I didn't bring up DC. And it makes sense because, you know what? No, I'm not going to say that because that would just lead to fighting. There was no fighting in the chat. All right, so first, let's talk about the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And we're going to pull this up here for you guys. The Temple Mount. Bam! There it is. There's the Temple Mount. That's the southern area view. Obviously, this is from a picture that somebody had taken in the sky. But look at this area here. This is the place. I don't know. Can people see that cursor? They can. Can you see that cursor? Can you see my cursor or no? Probably can't.
No, not from my distance. But
that's fine. So if you're looking at the Golden Dome place right in the middle there, that is the old city of Jerusalem, that area. But I believe that is a mosque now. Mm-hmm. That sits on top. That's the Dome of the Rock that sits on top of that area. Very sacred site to both. Like I said, it's a sacred site to Christians, Jews, and Muslims. All three belief systems together in that location, right? That place is one of the most holy places in three different religious belief systems. Okay. It is thought to be the very first place that the first temple, there's supposedly three. First and second had already happened. The third is supposed to come when the Messiah returns. So the first there was made and built by King Solomon, the wise King Solomon himself. Torn down, obviously, but that was the place where it resided. Now, how many people per year probably visit this place, probably visit the Dome of the Rock? You can't do anything to it. You can't dig underneath it. You can't do nothing to it.
And you're not allowed to go in there either most of the time. Like they have armed guards and they say you can't even go down and visit the rock.
No, you can't. You can't. Because they consider that to be very sacred to their belief system. But I have to wonder why you can't visit the rock.
The popular thing that they say is because they don't, one, of course, that it's sacred and that you shouldn't disturb it. And second is that whoever's in control at the time, which right now, of course, is the Islamists, they don't want the Jewish folks or the Christian people to get, whatever they're going to do and go down and mess with it or take it or do something to it because they're paranoid about it. So a lot of it's off limits because of people being afraid that it's going to be damaged or destroyed or stolen. Supposedly, it's another big piece of meteorite, like the Kaaba.
That's what I've heard.
But its main claim to fame is that it's where, was it Abraham was going to sacrifice his son?
No, you're thinking of the Kaaba.
I'm thinking of different, because something else happened here that's equally on that level of something important as far as like biblical stuff. Was it the one? Was this where someone set foot on it and then was ascended to heaven or something like that? Like
now that you might be right about that. That I think is right, but I know that the Kaaba was where I believe it was Ishmael sacrificed his son. I believe
he was going to, and then he was stopped by.
Then he sacrificed an oxen, this, that, and the third. I was gonna say it, but I'm glad you did because thank you for saying it.
An interesting point too, before we get too far away from it, is when you look at the picture.
Oh,
you can.
My bad.
No. You can see
amateur hour.
It's a big platform.
Yeah.
It looks like, it's just city walls, but it's built on a big, gigantic platform that's like the stuff
there you go.
at Baalbek.
Yeah.
It is a big, solid mass platform that's been kind of carved there. And so UFO folks are like, well, you know what? That was originally a landing space because it's so thick and so large. It's meant to absorb rocket blasts and things like that, which is an interesting point. Very interesting point, which partially may explain why everybody's all interested in it, because all of their religions would be based on this ancient astronaut thing. But, again, speculation.
We haven't done those in a while.
I know I've been in a good mood.
See?
My energy has increased exponentially.
Exponentially. So there, and like I said, it's a very important place for people of those faiths, and it's one of the only ones where three different faiths kind of converge at that point. Because the other religious stuff is either Christian or it's Islamic.
Mhm.
There isn't one that converges all three faiths, which is very interesting. The next one we're going to get into here is, let me pull it up. Here we go. This one, and I knew that this was important here, was hold on. Bam. There it is. Well, the reason we skipped dad jokes this time is because I wanted to talk about these places, and it's just, I feel like this is more important than our dad jokes, but we'll get back to those. Don't worry about that. St. Peter's Basilica. Now, for those of you that don't know, St. Peter was essentially the leader of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. And
he was the senior.
Yep. And so he dies here. This is where he is buried. He is buried at this location. And the old basilica, they had to basically fell into ruin, then they rebuilt it and put it here. Now, this makes sense because this is the most known place in all of Vatican City. Now, Vatican City, okay? Basically, I don't know how much of you guys know about who is, do me a favor and tell me who that is.
That's Maxine Maxwell, from one of our friends from in Washington State.
Well, thank you,
Always
Maxine.
good to hear from you.
Thank you so very much, Maxine. We appreciate the comment. Maxine was on our show along with Tony Lucas a couple years ago, actually. They were talking about the Washington area, and it's the lake. I remember the lake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the name of the lake, but it was a very good conversation, and I enjoyed it very much so, and hope they're all doing well, actually. Hope everybody out there is doing well. And so what we have here, St. Peter's Basilica, is one of the coolest places to me, just because look how beautiful that looks. Crescent Lake. Thank you, Maxine. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. This is just a cool building. The Vatican, say what you want, right? But their architecture is top notch. Top notch architecture.
Now, was that built on the site where he was supposedly crucified upside down?
That's what I've heard. Where he was made a martyr is where he died, and was where he was buried, died. That's the spot, supposedly. Yes, it's in Italy, but no, it's not in Italy. And I'll explain. So it is in the country of Italy. However, it is not Italy. It is Vatican City. Vatican City has its own government, police force, army. What is their names? The Swiss Guard.
Yeah.
The Swiss Guard has its own rules, laws. If you get in trouble in Vatican City, you go to Vatican City jail. You don't go anywhere else. You go to Vatican City jail.
It's kind of like Disney World up until very recently. They had their own little special carved out thing that made them their own autonomous little area. Now they're not, but
yes, same concept. Yes.
Yeah, it's super funny that I've connected those two in my brain now. Now I'm always going to think that Vatican City and Disney World are connected.
I could connect them in a different way, but it's probably not appropriate for the show.
And I was thinking that too. I was thinking that now, but let's dial that down just a smidge.
Yeah, that ain't that type of show, Champarovska.
Let's dial that.
It is a very pretty prison. I don't know if they lock you up there. I think they lock you up. There's another place, but that is the most or that is the biggest viewed place in Vatican City, is that location right there. That's the biggest thing you can see. And the fact that it sits on a ley line makes a lot of sense, because anybody that knows about the Vatican, we've talked about the Vatican on a couple different shows.
Mhm.
It's more or less a place that houses a treasure trove of tomes, books, supposedly aliens, all this Jupiter jazz, but very fascinating. No, St. Janus. St. Janus. I live St. Janus. We'll
Oh
talk about
boy.
that. We should bring that episode back, the Immortals episode. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Or Holy Relics. It was a Holy Relics one. That was a good one. I like that episode. So here's St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Nothing too otherworldly about it. It really only houses one religion, and that's Catholicism. And that is an offshoot of Christianity.
St. Peter was supposedly the first pope,
Yes.
if that helps anybody.
And Christianity is more of a mixing, or Catholicism is more of a mixing of Christianity and paganism, due to the internal factors that went on during that time.
It's all downhill from here.
It 100%. Like, I'm not going to do it. You guys aren't going to set me up for the okie doke. That's
Ooh.
for diggity darn sure. This episode's off the rails. But thank all of you for being here. We're having a good time. Thank you guys for being here. The next one that I have a personal interest in, that has always fascinated me, that I've really recently just started studying the religion of, is, let me find it. I just had it. There it is. The Kaaba in Mecca. One of the coolest different type of things. And I'm of the belief system, and I'm sure like Muslims would probably give me a lot of flack for what I'm about to say, but it's more of Islam reminds me of a mixing of pre-Islamic Arabic Bedouin nomadic tribe beliefs mixed with sort of a Judaic style faith. I don't mean that insultingly, by the way. I mean that in terms of like how Christianity is a supposed mixing of a savior and a Judaism being a pagan belief system, because a lot of people believe that.
Well, the three of them are basically called the Abrahamic religions because it holds that as a central part of it. They're all based around
Zoroastrianism, because it was also in the Bible.
Right, of course. But you're only allowed to have three. 3 is a good number, and 4 is a bad number. So that's why somebody had to go. Sorry, guys. But Abrahamic religions, Abrahamic faiths, because they all spring from Abraham founding the tribes and things from there.
Yes. And that's the thing too. When we look at the Kaaba, it is a beautiful piece of art. Now, I have to honestly say that I love Islamic art and architecture because they cannot have any graven images, no idols, no nothing. You will not see pictures of venerated Islamic scholars or Muhammad in any form or fashion, but they have the most beautiful geometrical designs you could ever see. And to me, this is just a really beautiful design that I really enjoy. Now, this here is located in Saudi Arabia, and it is the most important part of the Islamic faith. This is the place that every Muslim is supposed to make in their Hajj, which is the Du al-Hajj. It's the last month of the Islamic calendar. The Islamic calendar is on a lunar cycle. And because of that, the Islamic year is about 11 days shorter than our Gregorian calendar that we use. So the date of the Hajj changes from year to year. So this year, for instance, in 2023, the Du al-Hajj extends from the 19th of June to the 18th of July. So if you're making your pilgrimage, good luck. I hope you all make it safely. So, and I hope you all make it safely and, be safe. But there's another pilgrimage, and I did not know this until today, and that is the Umrah pilgrimage. That can be undertaken at any time. You do not have to go with the Du al-Hajj. You can just go. So if, it's December and you're a Muslim and you're like, I need to go make my pilgrimage, you can make it. And that is an Umrah pilgrimage, which I didn't know, which is very fascinating and interesting to me.
The main one, the
that was cool.
Hajj, you can take. It's only required that you take it once in your lifetime.
Yep,
It
that's
has to be
true.
once in your lifetime. Whereas the other one, you can take
Yeah,
when you feel the urge. You can be like, you know what, I feel the need. I got to go and I got to do this. But the Hajj is like, okay, this is the one time I
yes.
have to go, and this is where everything's aligning up. My schedule's free. I got to go and do this now.
Now
But
let
the other
me
one,
let me say this too, because if any Muslims are watching, I don't want to botch this because it's important to get people's
mm,
faiths right so that you don't misconstrue them and people build up prejudices based on
right?
them. You only take the pilgrimage if you are able, both physically and financially. So I want to put that out there. I don't want to put any bad ideas on that. If you take it uh, and you're both of those things, you're fine. If you don't have the money for it, it's okay. It's understandable, but you should take it. I think that's really interesting. I've never talked to
I
anybody that actually have
believe,
taken one of these.
I believe they have networks like they have Islamic networks that'll like help fund trips for pilgrimage and things like that.
I've heard that.
Um, I don't want to get people like started on like, oh, there's money used for this purpose and this purpose. Oh, don't do it. I don't want to get into that because
No,
it's easy to
because
slip into stuff like that, especially here in the
yes,
United States where there's a lot
yes,
of that sentiment.
yes,
But
I agree.
there are a lot of legitimate things where they set up funds to get you if you need to take your Hajj and you're like, you know what, I got to do it. I
Yes,
don't know when I'm going to be able to do it again. This is the only time I have. I just don't have the money to get there and back. There are things you can do. Now, I don't personally know how to access any of that. I am not a Muslim and I'm not going to try to look into it and pry into their business, you know. But if you are Islamic or any interest in that and you're trying to figure that stuff out, then there are resources for you, and I encourage you to look for them.
and I think that as people who are not Islamic, we should definitely not take that biased viewpoint towards Muslims. I've met many a good Muslim, especially when I was in college. Met many a good Muslim. Never had an issue. I think the media portrays things in a way that is very sickening, and I think the things that our government has done is far worse than anyone from an Islamic country could ever do. And I don't care what side of the political fence you're
Eastern
on.
Europe,
I don't
Eastern Europe,
I don't care
Eastern Europe.
what political side of the fence you're on. Um, any government that brings Nazis into the country isn't a good government. So, and I stand on that. And if you don't like it, that's fine. There's plenty of other podcasts to listen to. So, but I've never had a bad thing with Muslims, and I'm not going to start being a disrespectful person. And I think the Kaaba is a fascinating piece of architecture to me,
The
and I
interesting thing about it is that the actual stone is embedded in the side of that big building.
yeah, uh-huh,
Like it's in this like worked art piece
yep,
that some people have said looks kind of female anatomy related, which is interesting. I'm not going to, go into that too much, but it's just it's embedded in there and
yep.
supposedly and when you go on the Hajj, you go there and you circle this a certain number of times
Seven
and
clockwise or counterclockwise. It's one of the
and
two.
they
I
used
forget.
to I see there's like a little barrier here, but I know at some points and I don't know if they still do it, but they've had it open where you actually as you circle you try to get and you try to like graze it with your fingers as you go by.
Mhm.
You're not supposed to just stop and stand there and just take hold of it, but it's okay to like get a touch on it as you're going by, which is supposedly it's supposed to grant you good luck or something like that. I don't know, something within the faith. I don't know the exact terminology within the faith, but it's supposed to give you some favor or good fortune or something.
No, it was kind of cool. I went on YouTube and I watched because I've been studying the Quran. I started about a year or two ago, and I've been studying it on and off because I find it to be fascinating. And I watched a video of somebody going through their Hajj. They went on
Mm,
the pilgrimage, and it was just utterly fascinating the amount of people, and they all dress in white
mm,
a lot of the times, and you have to wash your hands. Like you have to be clean. You wash your feet. You wash your hands. You have to be clean.
mm,
That's a really important point. But what I found to be interesting too about this location is this predates Islam.
mm,
This location was actually a place where pre-Islamic Arabic Bedouin tribes would come and worship their god.
Mhm.
They would worship the god that's here. And I am fascinated with pre-Islamic Arabia as well, because that is where the jinn come from. People think that the jinn are Islamic, or created from Islam. They're not. They predate Islam. They were even the pre-Islamic Bedouin tribes in those areas believed in jinn. And we have to understand something. I want people to understand something. These places we are discussing, this and the Temple Mount, these are older than the United States. We tend to walk around with blinders on thinking that, we're an old society. No, we pale in comparison to these places. These are next level
Uh-huh.
ancient civilizations that I think, how old are we now? How old is our country?
We celebrated the bicentennial some
Like
number of years
70s?
ago.
Wasn't the 70s we did that? Like
Um,
73. Wait, 1776. So that would be 1976.
mhm.
So we're 200 some odd years into being a full blown. Not that we
And
weren't
the other,
something before with the Native
yeah,
Americans and everything else, but in terms of a
functioning
collective,
society.
yes, a collective
Mhm.
society, we're not even close.
The other
We're
thing
not even
about this
close.
stuff, the other thing about these places is they even predate all of the religions that venerate them now
Yes,
by a
100%.
large margin.
Very
They were
large.
already there, and
Yes.
people were already using them either for some form of worship or for something before even these religions. Some of these religions, like Judaism, is pretty old.
Yeah. 100%.
Um, I mean, Islam is the newest of the three, and it's
Yes.
still like
No.
ancient to us.
I think, well, yeah, is Islam
It
older
came
than,
after Christianity
did it?
because they already knew, because Christianity had Jesus and Islamic folks.
Zoroastrianism?
They got kicked out. We don't care. But
Justice for Zoroastrianism.
they actually supposedly also predate Judaism.
Well, they're one of the oldest religions in that
But
area in terms of a collected religion. They are probably the oldest.
mhm,
When they got kicked out, they went to like India
mhm.
and places like that because they have a really big
Yeah,
Zoroastrian population in India. It's very
mm.
odd.
It
Sorry,
caught
Lana.
on. It caught on there very much. But that's the big point, is that a lot of these places have been around longer than we even have a collective human
Yes.
memory of.
100%. And so, I think that these kind of places should be well respected. I don't think that, it always makes me sad when people are like, we should just go over there and bomb it and go crazy. I don't think that solves a problem. I think you create a bigger problem by destroying, me and my co-host, we get into some fieriness when these people went and blew up, the different statues and things and
Mhm.
the supposed Taliban boys. I'm like,
It
what's the
wasn't just
point?
them either, because the
It's
United States
not.
bulldozed an entire section of Mesopotamian ruins to put a military base during the Iraq War, and it's kind of like they flattened it. They just
Flattened
flattened
it.
it,
They didn't
the
care.
whole place, because
Did
you
not
have to
care.
build on it. And
Did not care.
it's a shame. It is 100% a shame that these things just disappear. And Mesopotamia, I love it. I
He loves
love
it. He would
Mesopotamia.
live there.
Like,
If Mesopotamia could come back and pick him up, he would move there tomorrow. Like tomorrow. He would live in Sumer if he could.
I might. I'd get
mean-
I'd put my house on top of one of the ziggurats. I'd let somebody slap me once a year.
I mean, we hang out. I do that anyway, so it don't really matter. No, I'm kidding.
Well, there you go. We already got it covered.
All right. So we're getting to some time here. Jeez Louise, chips and cheese. So the next one I want to get into, and I think you know what? I'll let you talk about this one. Let's talk about the Washington Monument. I did not pull a picture up for the Washington Monument.
It's not just the monument; it's all of DC. And
but
this
the
is
ley
interesting.
line specifically runs underneath that focal point. And we all know what the Washington Monument represents, just like all
Ding,
the
ding, ding,
obelisks
ding,
in
ding.
Egypt. I digress.
It's super interesting because Washington, D.C., it's a place of power, but not a place of power like the other ones are. Because the fact that the ley line is there you would think that it'd be more like an important kind of sacred spot, and it's like the capital and everything. But there's so much corruption and things that happen up there, not to get into a side tangent or anything, that it, political power seems like a completely different um a completely different arena than some of the other this is some meta level uncanny stuff.
No, I think that would be perfect. Actually, we'll talk about it after the show's over. But I think that'd be
Um,
actually a good idea.
but the Washington Monument is the focal point, and this it has some, you know, certain connotations
If you take that out, and I just had a thought, it acts as an antenna.
reaching up into the sky, just like everything else.
Yep.
And built around it, all of DC is in these certain shapes and configurations to maximize supposedly the energy going in. Now this is going into a little bit of conspiracy territory, but you can actually look at the map and you can see where these shapes are. There's a pentagram on there.
Yep.
And it's not just the pentagon because that's five-sided, but there's a pentagram somewhere else in the area.
Yes, and he's
And
not
there's
wrong. He's not. So far, you thinking,
Huh?
oh, he's crazy. Look at the map. Go online and look at the map. There was 100% a pentagram in that area.
Yeah. And every major building, the Capitol building, the White House, all the different places where the Senate and the House hang out, all the different other areas, all the associated buildings are part of this plan. And supposedly the guy planning it knew all of this, and he was part of the Freemasons, which throws another like conspiracy thing onto the pile. But you have to also think, like, as we mentioned last time, Freemasonry
Isn't free.
is older than what, yeah, it's older than what it's being presented as. Like, we see it as this like
Yes.
weird ritual thing, and they're trying to control the world, but now they're not. Now they're just a bunch of old guys and dress up doing whatever. But before all of that, it was a legitimate secret society of guild trained people, highly trained, highly skilled people. And if you didn't have the skills, you were not a member. You weren't just a member because your dad was or your grandpa was or whatever. Not like
Right.
it got to be. You
Right.
had to know
Correct.
stonemasonry or something involving how to make things. And that's what was based on all of these different buildings that went into where most of the ley lines are. Freemasonry built the pyramids, more or less. It built a lot of the other places. And so now to have that involved in DC, in the focal point of United States power, which is funny considering how much corruption is there. It almost seems to have had an opposite effect. It almost seems like a place of negative power, which is really interesting. But you can go all kinds of different directions with that. And I find that kind of fascinating. And it's the most recent, I think, of all the ley line places that have been built. Compared to all the other monuments and things, I mean, those have been around for thousands of years. This has been around for a few hundred years, and not even all then. Like, not all the buildings were there in the last 200 years. It took a while to build all that. Like, we didn't have all that immediately. Like, 13 colonies are here. Let's build a Pentagon. Let's build this. Let's build this. That all came in time. So it's really recent. And maybe that's why it is the way it is, because they haven't been able to fully tap into the power of the land that it's on. Speculation.
And that is the end of the show. However, there are still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more locations that we're going to go over. But if you're not a Patreon member, you're not going to know those locations. So as soon as we cut air here, we're going to keep recording. And this is going to go to the Patreon donors. So if you're not a Patreon donor, we're going to send you that link. We're going to put the link in the description here. I think it's still the same link. And we're going to record this video. And the Patreon donors are going to get the extra scenes. What is going to start happening is this Uncanny Earth is going to go overtime. But if you are not a Patreon donor, you don't get the overtime. You get the show, but you don't get the goodies after the show. And we're going to start doing that. So we love you guys, but we also want to provide more content to all of you as best way we can. But we also got to keep the lights on, guys. The lights aren't cheap. The light bill is not cheap. And we got a lot of good things coming for you guys. Some trips planned as soon as vacation timer sets. We got some good stuff coming. So
Mm.
don't think we haven't forgot. Don't think I don't have my film video too that I'm putting out. That's also going to be a Patreon benefit. So make sure you are subscribed to the Patreon, and make sure this is correct. And we have relatively awesome plans. And so all of our beginning tiers will get the extended episode of this show after we air it. So don't hesitate to subscribe to the Patreon. The Patreon is important. It helps us keep things moving. It helps us keep the wheels rolling here in the studio. So please, if you can, if not, you're still always going to get this show. The main show will always be free,
100% free.
across all platforms. And I'm looking into a way to get it to where it can be downloaded, because I want to get that back to you guys again. I want to get the downloads back to you guys again. I'm looking into maybe, I'm thinking it's of the ability to download maybe on maybe where's the audio go to for us?
Like
Spotify.
Anchor,
I don't know.
or
Yeah,
Spotify.
I think Anchor allows you to download it for free. So we'll work that out. I'm revamping the Patreon, but subscribers, you will get the after show of this Uncanny Era. So as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks next week, where we will be talking about a couple of different things. I want to talk about the last voyage of the Demeter, which is very, very interesting movie coming out in August about a little retelling of Dracula. And we're going to talk about Dracula himself. We haven't done that in a while. And I would like to talk about vampires again and kind of bring that back to the forefront of what we were doing. And I got a cool book on vampires and stuff like that. So next week, vampires. We haven't talked about them for a while, guys. And I want to start bringing the old topics back.
We got the
New
zombies. Now we're
information.
back to the vampires.
He brought the zombies back. So
Oh
I want to
boy.
bring the vampires
Old
back.
school.
So we love you guys. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you folks next week. Take care of yourselves. Peace.